Hello and welcome back to the FEZ show. It has been a long time, but we've enjoyed our sort of extended summer holidays, you could say, and we're back now to talk everything season 9 of the Formula E Championship. And joining me, as always, is the one and only Edward Hunter and Jack Pickering. How are we, boys?
Delighted to be back. I'm amazed that I haven't actually gone anywhere for the past 2 months, but yeah, it's nice not to be getting on and off planes, the luxurious life. But yeah, looking forward to be back to this.
Yeah, happy Halloween, guys. Hope you have a good one. I know I've got a pumpkin to carve out so that people actually come to my house, because usually no one does. But anyway, enough of that. Let's talk some Formula E, because season 9 is going to be here before you know it, and there's lots to get through because it's been a while since we last did the last one that PK did in Souls.
Yeah, it has been, and I just figured, obviously, it's the end of October now, and you're quite right in saying, like, you know, it won't be long until December when we're actually seeing the season 9 cars out on track in Valencia, and then January the season kicks off, and we've got a pretty tasty calendar, which we'll get into a little bit later. But we've got to start with the driver moves, and I want to start with one team, right? And that's DS. Now, DS obviously have moved from Techeetah, which we'll talk about Techeetah later, but have gone over to the former Dragon team, now renamed DS Penske. And they've signed Stoffel Vandoorne, obviously former champion from last season, and Jean-Eric Vergne. Now, I'm going to come to you first, Pico. Does that mean, by signing Jev and Vandoorne, that we're going to expect DS Penske to have instant success? Or because, yes, okay, they're going to get all this, you know, technological change and personnel coming from DS, but, you know, it was still that Dragon team, maybe on the operation side, you know, is that going to, do you think that's going to gel well? Or, you know, basically, is it a recipe that could take a while to get started, or do you think it's going to be an instant success?
All I'm going to say is good luck trying to beat them. They've got the reigning champion, they've got a 2-time champion, and they won 3 championships on a bounce with Techeetah, and also with Penske, they're a huge name in motorsport. Obviously, it's been known as Dragon the last couple of years, but it is Penske Autosport now, basically. So it's still going to be Jay at the helm, but I'm not sure if they're going to have more involvement from the Penske side. But I do think they are going to be the ones to beat. I think it will be very, very hard to see, because stuff was so consistent last year. Jev has got the knowledge of a 2-time champion. I can't see them not coming minimum top 3 in the championship for the teams, and both drivers will be top 5 in the championship next year. I'm almost certain about it. Watch me get proved wrong within like 3 races.
Yeah, let's see. It's an interesting concept, Ed. Like, you know, it feels like, yeah, this team should just go off, as Jack says, and go off and win and win races. But motorsport's not as easy as that.
Yeah, and it's interesting you're talking about the staff numbers, because I've been reading that basically after Gen 2 ended, after sale, a lot of the Dragon Penske staff were all let go, apparently. So it is essentially the DS performance team, with only a couple of mainstays staying on from the Dragon era. So it'll be interesting to see how they get on, because essentially Jay Penske here, who we talked about how fiercely independent the squad was, it seems like this is now finally where they I guess bite the bullet and become a sort of manufacturer team and give up that sort of some of that autonomy, because it seems like they even announced Eugenio Franzetti as director of DS Performance. They're going to bring him in essentially to oversee the technical side of the team. So it'll be interesting to see how they get on. And like Pico says, 2 really, really highly rated drivers in Vandoorne and Vergne, the 2 Vs, of course. They're hoping to add a triple V, because the 3rd V will be Victory, I guess. But I think certainly they're going to be, I wouldn't say the overall favorites, because I think it's a little bit too early to say. And I think the DS powertrain we saw in the Gen 2 era, that started off strong, and then it's basically got overtaken by Mercedes by the end of the era. So I think there's going to be a couple others like Jaguar and Porsche that could be quite strong. So I certainly think DS have still got to regain that title because they haven't won one since season 6 essentially. So, but it'll be interesting to see how quickly, whether they land on their feet at the end of testing and going into the first round in Mexico, or if there are teething troubles that they need to overcome.
Pika, this one obviously you might not have seen yet, but obviously Dragon were based by Silverstone, so it'd be interesting to see what happens to their building sites there if they move out of their building site, because obviously DS have built that factory in Paris, which Jean-Eric Verne took us round when obviously Techeetah were there, but obviously Techeetah aren't there anymore, so DS will be there, and obviously that will be where the Dragon, the Penske sort of operation may take place from. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to that Dragon building towards as the season progresses, I suppose, at Silverstone.
Well, I can officially confirm it's still there. Don't worry, they're still there. The lights are still there. I mean, I haven't seen the lights on or anything like that. It's because I drive past it at 8 a.m. in the morning when I go to work. Yeah, from what I heard, that there was some speculation that maybe that Techeetah were going to move into those facilities, but obviously with what's happening with Techeetah, and then it's looking like that they won't be on the grid next year. So it's not going to happen for this year, but I know that Mark Preston, he lives just down the road from me somewhere in Oxford, so it's not that too far of a commute for him either. So but yeah, we'll have to see with that. So yeah.
So let's talk about another move then. So we had Lucas Di Grassi. Now Lucas Di Grassi kind of knows where to move, right? So he moved from Audi, obviously, because Audi left, and he went to Venturi last season, who are now renamed as Maserati, and he managed, competitive car, found himself a competitive car, and he likes to sniff out a competitive drive, and he's moved himself to Mahindra. So Ed, does this mean Mahindra are going to be back to the old days of Felix Rosenqvist winning races, and Lucas Di Grassi is going to be pioneering that with Oliver Rowland, or is it just a move for a move?
It's tough to say. It certainly doesn't seem like Mahindra had. Obviously, they didn't have on the. If you look at the results last season, it wasn't an amazing season. It was a bit messy, with lots of incidents. But certainly the pace wasn't too far away at certain rounds. Certainly they ended on a high of Rowland getting that podium in Seoul. But it's really hard to predict the future, obviously, and we know ZF have put a lot of their resources into Gen 3. But I would say I certainly think it's a smart move, because it's a decent seat to go for in any season at Mahindra. Will Lucas get on there well there? Will he get on top of Rowland? He's certainly got kind of a. I certainly think Mortara, at least in most of the first half of the season, he had the edge on Di Grassi. It was only really in the last couple of races that Di Grassi's results started to come together, of course, winning in London as well. So, yeah, I certainly think it was a good move, but whether it's going to put Lucas in championship winning contention again, I'm not too sure. I have a feeling maybe Mahindra aren't quite there yet.
What are your thoughts, Pico?
Well, firstly, I just want to shout out to Dilbag Gill, who's left the team after 8 long seasons, which came as a real surprise, I think, because I do think Dilbag was instrumental in bringing Lucas to Mahindra, and so yeah, and he's one of the characters of the Formula E paddock, and it is a shame that he's now left that, but he's gone on to do pastures new. But yeah, with Mahindra, I think we might be in for something rather special this season from Mahindra, because if you think about it, Lucas has just gone to Mahindra, Robin Frines has just jumped ship from Envision to Mahindra, and they're both customer team. Envision to who are getting Mahindra customer power units. So I do reckon that something special could come from Mahindra this year, but we knew with Lucas that he wanted to be in a factory team. When we spoke to him, I think way back in Rome, he said we asked him about the differences between working with Venturi, working with Audi, and it seemed that one thing that he did really he really enjoyed was being able to help develop a car. So what he might be doing with Mahindra is he might be doing basically what Lewis Hamilton did with Mercedes and start, midfield and then build it up. Admittedly, Mercedes happened way quicker than anyone else thought that they would be able to do. But I think that's what Lucas is trying to do. And we know that, well, Lucas said earlier in the season he's not 100% sure if he's going to be around for Gen 4. So I think that this is his last venture in Formula E. Join a midfield team, build it up to the front, and then call time on his career.
It'll be a sad day for Formula E when Lucas Di Grassi goes. It will be a sad day, but I think he's still got a couple of seasons in him just yet. But I want to move on because I'm going to come straight back to you on this one, Pico. Andre Lotterer. Now, we knew about this in London. Like, it was kind of coming to fruition that he was going to move to Andretti, but he's kind of had one of these up and down Formula E careers in terms of 1 minute it's very good, like, he's performing well. The next minute he's, nowhere. Was it a surprise to you that he was linked to Andretti and has got that seat?
Initially, yes, it was it was a surprise to me because they put a lot of time into Askew and they wanted him to be the American hope in Formula E, basically. And I think it's a shame that they've ditched they've ditched Askew after one season, because towards the end of the year he was doing a mega job and he got 2 top 5 finishes, one in London, one in Seoul. And so yeah, it's disappointing to see him go, but this season I do think Andre Lotterer has actually been really good. He was consistently in the duels for most of the season, and yeah, he was able to take it to Pascal Wehrlein, and going into the final few races, they were basically neck and neck. Yes, Wehrlein just pipped Lotterer in the end, but if we were speaking about Andre this time last season, we were saying, oh, he's had a terrible year. I'm not sure whether he should really still be here. Whereas this year he's been toe to toe with Pascal, and yeah, I think he's well deserving of the Andretti seat for next year. But yeah, I do feel a bit sorry for Ollie Askew, who has done just one season and probably back off to IndyCar potentially for next year.
Yeah, it's a shame about Askew because obviously, yeah, you were right, but I feel like Formula E now is much more it's getting more like a results business. If you can't hit the ground running, in the first like 3 or 4 races, then your seat is under jeopardy by the end of the season.
He did score points in the first race back in Diriyah as well.
Yeah, but I just think general performances, I suppose. But it's tough, isn't it? Formula E is not, they used to give rookies a chance knowing how difficult it is, but I just don't think that can happen anymore in the series. But I want to move on to Maserati. Now, Maserati officially, Ed, haven't, announced their 2 drivers. And there's more and more rumours at a precise moment that Maximilian Günther could be heading that way, which makes sense. And Eduardo Mortara, now you'd assume, I was like, hang on a second, right? Now, Venturi is now Maserati, and Mortara, that's been Mortara's team. Mortara has been absolutely brilliant over the last couple of seasons, but he hasn't been announced yet. And I don't know if that's worrying or if that's just Maserati wanting to announce both drivers at the same time. But I'm going to throw a small curveball in there because we have a big name. And I think sometimes maybe with Formula E teams waiting a while to announce your drivers and seeing what happens in the F1 market might be a good thing. And I think Formula E would love this as well. Could they pinch Danny Ricciardo? Do you think they've maybe even spoken to Danny Ricciardo and go, hey, you know what, we've got a seat available? Because what it would do for Formula E and its marketing, getting a driver like Danny Ricciardo in, would be huge.
I guarantee they've tried to phone him, but I doubt Danny Ricciardo's picking up right now. So I think it's a bit of a fall here because Ricciardo's shown less than 0 interest in Formula E. So I think it's really hard to turn that into any kind of opportunity. But, as you said, it would be an interesting story, certainly for Formula E to see if Ricciardo could not rehabilitate himself, because it's not like he's been doing that badly, but certainly it would be a big boost for him if he could do essentially what the likes of Nick de Vries and others have done and sort of use it as a springboard somewhere else potentially. But in Formula E, you kind of need someone who's there for the long haul. And that was sort of why the likes of Esteban Gutierrez did a couple of races and then just left Formula E. I don't think there's really much point in getting Ricciardo if he does that. But as for Maserati, it's certainly a lot going on at that team. Obviously, big manufacturer sort of taking over. You've got Susie Wolff and Jerome D'Ambrosio both leaving so that James Rossiter can take the team principal role from pinched, of course, from the old DS Techeetah squad, where he was a driver, a test and reserve driver for like the most part, but also now a team principal. So the long honored tradition that we've seen Alan McNish and others do moving into that role. So yeah, it is odd that they haven't announced who the two drivers will be. I was sort of hoping maybe Oliver Turvey, as a Monaco resident, might have been able to squeeze in there because his career just seems to have ended not really on his own terms, which is a little bit sad, but that's the way it goes sometimes. And it looks like Gunther is almost certainly going to get that seat along with Mortara. It would be, in my opinion, a bit... I think it's like Mortara's like the golden goose, right? He keeps giving out those victories to Venturi. And, you know, obviously it's not quite the same as we're talking about Penske with DS taking over that team. With Maserati, it seems like it's mainly the same staff. There's a couple of people in the sort of branding part of the team and the sort of, there's a bit more resources, of course, available to them, but, and a sort of name change. But the people running that team, apart from, you know, obviously D'Ambrosio and Susie Wolff, are mostly that same Monaco Venturi squad that's running it day to day. So I think they have to keep Mortara, because if they don't, then almost certainly they're letting a potential champion just walk out on them, which I think would be a huge mistake after how well he's gone the past couple of seasons.
Yeah, Pika, what are your thoughts on Maserati? Mortara and going for the only options at this precise moment?
Yeah, from what I've heard, yes, it will be Mortara, and it's looking likely it'll be Max Gunther alongside him. Obviously, they've just they had a preliminary agreement with Nick de Vries. However, he's been snapped up by AlphaTauri in Formula One, and do you know what? All the best to Nick, because and it's fantastic to see someone from Formula E go to Formula One, and yeah, and he proved his worth in Monza with a P9, and so yeah, AlphaTauri snatched him up, and yeah, exactly, so excited to see him. But it did give Maserati a little bit of a headache, and so basically that last seat was always going to be between Turvey and Gunther. There were some rumours that maybe Di Grassi was trying to sort out something for Felipe Drugovich, the newly crowned F2 champion, but they kind of fizzled out very quickly. But yeah, it's looking like Turvey's going to be on the sidelines, and Gunther will get the call up for that team. But yeah, I know that Ed will be quite disappointed, because, you know, a big old Turvey fan, as we all are. Who doesn't like Oliver Turvey? Like, he's done a mega job in that Neo the past 7 and a bit years, and yeah, hopefully he'll be able to come back in some shape or form. But yeah, from what I've heard, yeah, Mortara and Gunther, and that should be announced some point soon.
Correct me if I'm wrong. McLaren, they've only announced Rene Rast. They haven't announced a second driver yet, have they?
No, they haven't. But the speculation is that Jake Hughes, who was the Mercedes development, is getting that seat, or is signed in there waiting to announce him.
Yeah, okay. Because let's talk very quickly. Ed, I'm just going to throw to you on Oliver Turvey, because I remember interviewing him. Now, Oliver Turvey, great guy, and has been a fantastic ambassador for Formula E. But I posed him the question when everyone was singing his praises, when his stock was high, right? Season 5 time, right? After, you know, season 4, it was a good season for Neo. He picked up that podium in Mexico, and his stock was high, and everyone said you need a better seat, right? You need to be in a better team. And he's been loyal to Neo, and we've now he's had a couple of seasons where he hasn't been able to do much with that car. And he's now not got a seat in Formula E. Now, I'm not saying go back to season 4, leave Neo, right? And maybe you have a better Formula E career. We don't know. But do you think, in hindsight, it was wrong for him to be as loyal to Neo, knowing what we know now? that he was effectively, or should he have left?
Well, it's a tricky one to say because, there's so many other things that, like, if he changes teams, then, like, let's say, for instance, we know, and we talked about this before on the podcast one or two times, that there was an offer from Nissan for season 5 from John Paul Drew before he passed away that Oliver Turvey didn't take. He decided to stay at Neo instead. And the Gen 2 era was honestly, I wouldn't say a complete disaster because he still got some points finishes, but certainly it didn't live up to expectations. And there were all sorts of issues, especially early on, with the team just didn't get on top of brake by wire and sort of how the Gen 2 car worked. And Turvey's been quite open about that. And yeah, it's sort of, you can sort of think, oh, if he'd just gone to Nissan, he would have been where Rowland's had, and he would have had the career that Oliver Rowland's had. But there's no guarantee of that, of course. We don't know. Maybe Nissan would have gone for Rowland eventually anyway. But yeah, you do feel that maybe he could have achieved more in Formula E. There's always niggling kind of doubt of the what ifs. But you can sort of see why he stayed at Neo 333 because there are a lot of people at the team that he knows. Obviously, we know the story about Martin Leach, the founder of the Next TV company, which became Neo, who sort of passed away after Turvey joined the team, and he knew Oliver Turvey quite well and was the one who phoned him up in the first place, I think, while he was racing at Le Mans, if I remember the story correctly. And so there's an emotional connection there, and it seems sort of, in a way, it's easy to look at, say, Sete Kamara being signed from Dragon, and you think, oh, he's been replaced by Sete Kamara, but I think it was more Ticktum's qualifying performances that maybe sealed the deal in his favor instead of Turvey. And so it seems like Dan Ticktum is the new Brute driver that Neo 333 are putting their faith in. And it'll be interesting to see. And certainly Dan's a lot younger as well, so he's got that going for him, whereas Turvey in his sort of mid-30s can maybe, he's still got, a good few years in him. I'm sure he'll do well in endurance racing and other categories as well. But yeah, so, like I said earlier, a little bit sad he won't get to end his Formula E career on his terms, but he still had that podium in Mexico, still showed what he could do when he was able to get the car working in his favor. And yeah, maybe if Techeetah come back for season 10, there'll be another few seats, and I think Turvey might be top of the list.
Yeah, it's a shame because I suppose the loyalty with Turvey, it sort of it coincides with his whole career because he's still that McLaren reserved like simulator test driver effectively, and he's had that for years and years and years. And I was really, really hoping that when McLaren came into Formula E that they'd pick up Turvey and go, okay, look, here's a race seat with us, right? But obviously that doesn't look like that's going to happen. And obviously he's been with that team for well over a decade. And I thought maybe it would have been nice. I know there's no such thing as nice, but Turvey I feel like has proved he's deserved it. And he could have jumped into that McLaren. And I reckon if he did jump into that McLaren alongside Rene Rast, he would have done a good job. But I'm going to move on to Porsche because we talked about Penske at the beginning, Pico. Porsche, or another team that's sort of getting there. But I think like it's time that we expect more from Porsche going into Gen 3. And obviously with Antonio Felix da Costa now, and Pascal Wehrlein, like when we talk about driver lineups, like that's as good, in my opinion, as Jean-Eric Vergne and Stoffel Van Dorn. Like, surely Porsche have got to get their act together and start making a race-winning car from Gen 3 onwards.
Well, we started to see it for this year. We saw for season 8. Sorry, we saw in Mexico how they absolutely dominated that race. So much so they were able to go an extra lap and catch everyone else out. But it was more of a one-off in the end. We did see it on occasion throughout the season. They were qualifying masters that up until London, they had never missed a dual qualifying at all. So like the pace is there, but the potential is there. I think now that they've signed Antonio Felix da Costa, as was revealed on the final Picos pit walk. You get to see him being trundled down on a tire wheeler thing. Little plug. Yeah. So I think that this is what like. It needs to happen now because they've signed a star driver alongside their current star driver. But yeah, as I said, I mean, like Lotterer was very good last year, but I mean, like it's hard to it's hard to get against Antonio Felix Acosta. I mean, he is an absolutely fantastic driver all through his career. And so I do think that Porsche will be there or thereabout. But the thing is with Formula E is it's so competitive, and you have all these manufacturers that are in the sport, and all of them are striving for greatness. And so you will occasionally find the odd the odd manufacturer a little bit further down. I think that last season, the fact that they were beaten by Andretti at the very last moment, because Jake Dennis had that fantastic run in London and in Seoul. It was I think they must be disappointed by that, but I think that they will come back stronger. I reckon they'll be top 5 in teams this season, but the thing is we haven't seen anything yet. We can't really say much.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see what happens with Porsche. And I feel like, you know, when they came in season 5 with Mercedes, like, you're expecting a name like Porsche to be battling at the front, and Mercedes did that. Porsche were there and thereabouts. Like,
wasn't Porsche season 6? I swear it was just Mercedes' HWA in season 5.
Yeah, you are right. But yeah, but they were announced together, you know what I mean? And then they kind of came in together in season 6. But I think, you know, we're going into season 9 now. Mercedes have won a Constructors' Championship. You know, took 2 drivers to a Drivers' Championship, but Porsche hasn't done that yet. And I think, like, it's now that we've got to see that. I want to move on, though, to Sebastian Buemi, Ed, because Sebastian Buemi has moved from Nissan. Now, Nissan, we'll get on to Nissan in a minute, but I think it's interesting that he's moved away from, and obviously the EDAMS partnership has gone, and maybe that's something to do with it. But Nissan in an entirety just looked quite strange. And we'll get onto that in a moment. But Buemi going to Envision, thoughts on that? But then which as a second, we talked earlier about the Mahindra powertrain being potentially strong, and maybe Robin Freins going there. But really, was Robin Freins going there just because of the Audi nature with the apt move? Do you see that move really for Freins like working out? And obviously then Buemi's switch to taking his place at Envision.
I think it's great for Envision, certainly. I can try and speak as fast as I can just to get through it all. Big news for Nissan, of course, losing both their drivers, of course, for completely new ones. But Buemi having to make that move, it's a big deal, obviously. I think Freins, that openings happened because Freins wasn't happy. It sounds like there was a bit of a disagreement. Not a huge one. I think Sam Smith may have been playing up a little bit in his reports, but it sounds like he didn't really, he wasn't exactly feeling like he belonged at Envision anymore. And we know it was Sam Bird's team for the longest time, and then he left, obviously. And now it sort of feels like they've got behind Nick Cassidy a little bit, and Robin Freins, I think, is feeling a little bit put out, which is probably why he's gone to Apt more than any. I think also he's got those connections with Apt as well, that his family's got those links there as well. From like way back. So him and Nico Muller, I think, looking like a really good team with the it's the Mahindra powertrain, of course, in the back of that. And I think for Buemi, obviously he'll have the Jaguar powertrain with Nick Cassidy as his teammate, and I think it's a good chance for him to reinvent himself a little bit after a few seasons where he took a bit of a beating at Nissan.
I agree. Pico, what are your thoughts on Robin Freins? Because it's interesting what Ed said there, because, you know, maybe there was a falling out, but it seemed like Robin Freins from the outside. Well, Robin Freins from the outside is quite hard to read, but, you know, he seemed like he was okay. He seemed like he was happy at Envision, and I feel like it maybe is that those Audi links that have caused him to maybe move that side. Do you see the move working for him, or do you think maybe he should have stayed at Envision, where, you know, maybe it wasn't his team per se, but Envision are a constant source of getting good results?
Yeah, I think with I completely understand what like Ed's saying. Yeah, I think that they became like kind of like equals. With Robin and Nick this last year, especially. Like Nick probably stepped it up from like New York onwards, and genuinely, like, I think he could have become if he'd had that pace at the start of the year, he could have been easily fighting for the championship. But I think that Buemi's become I think that Buemi moving there, I think that's a solid move for him. Because yes, I can see why he does need to reinvent himself a little bit, because season 7 was an absolute write-off, but season 8 was actually all right, and he ended up being the #1 driver at Nissan. But I think Nissan kind of needed a reset. The fact that they are now just the Nissan Formula E team, there is no EDAM's involvement whatsoever there now. And so I think they wanted to reset and start afresh. I mean, I was in the paddock in Seoul the entire weekend. Even though Sasha Fenestraz was a Jaguar reserve on the Saturday and raced with the Dragon on the Sunday, 99% of the time I saw him, he was sitting with the Nissan guys. So I think he's already got to know the team, and I think that the fact that Nato is going to be there as well, I think that's a solid lineup for Nissan. And I think we'll have to see if they can reset, go again this year. We know how fantastic they were in the first season of Gen 2, so I think that's their aim to do it again in Gen 3.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing with Nissan, because they went with that dual powertrain system, Pico, in season 5, and obviously it got banned. But so it was nice to see them sort of like invent something, and maybe if they can do something similar going into Gen 3. But that kind of wraps up all of the driver moves that we're going to talk about. We kind of covered, I think, everybody in small dribs and drabs, more detailed some than others, but there's been quite a lot. It's a massive shift going into Gen 3. But massive news. The identity of Formula E has changed because it has got rid of fan boost. Now, for some of you probably go, finally, big, oh, it's gone. Because really and truly, and I understand the argument is that it didn't add a ton of things to the show, effectively. Like, the same people were getting it every single time. You know, Stoffel Van Dorn, for example, was winning it every single race. And I think because of that, I think it's the right decision to get rid of it. And I don't think it had the impact that Formula E wanted it to have, effectively. Ed, what are your thoughts on fan boost changing?
Well, it was controversial ever since day one. You're right, Jack. And it's coming for a lot of criticism. Took, since 7 or 8 years for them to finally throw in the towel for fan boost, I guess. I don't know. I've never been the biggest fan of fan boost, but I sort of saw in the early seasons, I think it served a bit more of a purpose. There was a bit more interaction with the fans. There were more giveaways to do with fan boost. There was even some teams, I think, even tried to tie in, like, if we get a certain amount of fan boost votes, or like Mahindra did a thing where they were planting trees if they got a certain amount of fan boost votes or something like that, which I thought was an interesting one. But I think people have seen it for the gimmick that it is. It's not even kind of an afterthought in the broadcast, the way it gets brought up. And I think it's probably for the best for the integrity of the sport that Formula E moves on, because it always gets brought up as like one of the top 5 dumbest rules in sports. Fan boost usually tops the list. So it's not getting the right kind of attention as well. And I think Formula E would do well to sort of steer away from it now. And it's only come about 7 years too late, but hey, at least they finally come around to our way of thinking. And hopefully now they can replace it potentially, or even just leave attack mode in and use that as the new kind of, gimmicky kind of thing that affects the racing. So I think it's a good move. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing something else come in to replace it, but I'm not sure exactly what that would look like.
I get the idea of fan boost, and I think, Pico, everyone got the idea of fan boost, whether you like it or you hated it. Like, it was a nice way for a new championship to come in and get the fans involved, make them feel like they're having an effect on the race. I just think because it had such a little impact in how it came across, and it was kind of like that popularity contest in a sense, is probably why it's faded away. I do think it was a good concept to think about at the beginning, maybe poorly executed or poorly managed.
I'm in complete agreement with that. I'm surprised that it's gone, because I know that Formula E have always been so pro fan boost in history, and then yeah, to see it go, I mean, like, oh, it brings a tear to all of our eyes, tears of joy more than likely. But yeah, I think it was the right time. I think the fact that it's the end of one era, we're going into the next, I think is the correct time to call it a day. They tweaked it as well between Gen 1 and Gen 2 to see if it worked, but it didn't really work. And yeah, and I think it's the right thing to do. To be fair, I didn't really mind it because I'll be honest, I barely saw it ever affecting a race. I think I saw like Senna overtake Prost in Putrajaya one year, and then I didn't see it impact a race until Da Costa overtook Evans in Monaco a couple years ago. They're like the only two times I ever saw fan boost actually affect something. It was so for me, like, yeah, it was there, but it didn't really do anything. So yeah, I mean, I don't mind that it's gone. It was a nice idea, but yeah, I think times change, and yeah, it's time for it to go.
It was interesting when you said Senna and Prost. I was like, whoa, we're going back, and I was like, oh no, Bruno, Senna, Nicholas, Prost. I was like, of course. But when you said, I was like, yeah, of course. Just made me laugh for a split second when I was like, you hear Senna and Prost, and you automatically go to Alan and Ayrton, and then you're like, actually, yeah, we had Nicholas.
Yeah, it's funny we've got
Bruno.
McLaren going back, because a lot of people are wondering when Bruno Senna is going to make that comeback in Formula E that he keeps talking about every couple of years.
Maybe one day. But I think, yeah, fan boost, a nice idea. I think you are right, Pico. It was probably the right time for it to go. I want to talk about Techeetah. We kind of talked about this a little bit. So, Ed, I'm going to come to you on this because it is a sad day. You know, Techeetah, we don't know. They could not be back in 2023. So, and there was always this financial cloud always covering them. And we were like, okay, but they're still here. So it seems like maybe that was the main reason why DS wanted to find a new home, because maybe Techeetah just didn't have the finances to help prop up what DS wanted to do.
Exactly. And I talked before, I think DS were just a bit annoyed about having to stick up the bill for Techeetah in a way. And we know Techeetah were trying to go for all these cryptocurrency sponsors that kept falling through, which is always a bit of a house of cards, essentially, that can fall down quite precariously. So I think Techeetah sort of bet all on one way, and it just didn't go their way in terms of finances, which is a shame that a team that wins the both championships in the first 2 years of Gen 2 can't actually survive into the Gen 3 era, at least not for the first year. But Mark Preston, the optimism certainly hasn't gone. He said in the podcast recently, well, I set up Super Aguri in 100 days. But I think there was never going to be any repeat heroics here, because the championship's much bigger than it was during the first year when Team Aguri was one of the first ones to sign up as well. So yeah, it is sort of sad to see that squad finally miss a season or potentially go under completely. But I certainly don't think it's the last we've seen of Mark Preston and his little team of people. I think they might come back into Formula in some way. But Techeetah, yeah, sadly, they are about as dead as my internet connection. So
very funny. It was very interesting because I remember interviewing Trevor Carlin actually, and back in season 1, season 2, he was like, to run a Formula E team, it was like 3 to 6 million. So it wasn't a lot. So a chance for Mark Preston, even with limited budget, to potentially find that money much easier. Whereas now, Trevor Carlin was talking, and this was a year ago, or 2 years ago, that we're looking at like 20-30 million now to set up a Formula E team. So
and in a time of high inflation and a big crisis as well.
And obviously that doesn't help now, but like it was interesting to see how much just starting a team from season 1 being 3 to 6 million to now like 30 million to if you wanted to start a team today, and how much it's changed and how much the series has progressed, which is a shame. But we want to move on to the calendar now, because the calendar is getting a little bit tasty and a little bit bigger, which is kind of what we want. We kind of want more races and more cities, but there's still a lot of things to sort out, and the things that I'm a bit confused about. One, okay, we're going to talk about Paris first, Pico, because Paris signed a every 2-year agreement, right? So they should be on the calendar this year. 100% they should be on the calendar. Now there is that one slot, May 20th, which I'm hoping it's Paris. Now, I know Paris is one of those short tracks. There's energy management's not very great on that in terms of every driver can race flat out because, you know, energy is not really an issue. It'd be interesting to see what the Gen 3 cars could look like and how they'd race around Paris, because it is a small track, but it was Paris. And, you know, I don't know what Formula E's identity anymore is with their calendar, because we're going to all these new places like Hyderabad in India and so forth, Cape Town, which we'll get onto. But these core cities like Paris, New York, London, obviously London's back. New York's not on the calendar yet. Paris, we don't know what's going on. Like, I feel like these big name cities that Formula E work so hard to get onto the calendar, we're struggling to keep. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing.
Well, yeah, May 20th was obviously supposed to be the Soli Prix, but they're doing some renovations around the site we raced around this year, so they're taking a year off for the moment, and then with the full intention of coming back on the season 10 calendar. Yeah, I mean, it's disappointing because I think we needed to have more Asian races after we haven't been able to go there for the last 3 years or so, but yeah, we now have that one date, May 20th. I don't think it's going to go to Paris. Yes, as you said, they signed that agreement, which was 2 years, and that was obviously with the Olympics in mind, because in 2024 we're going to Paris for the Olympics, and so Formula E races would happen in 2023 and 2025. But it would have been involved in the first draft of the calendar, I would have thought. So, and the fact that it's not even involved in the second draft of the calendar makes me even more surprised, and I'm not 100% sure why it's not there. What I do think will happen is I think that May 20th slot will eventually go to Marrakesh, as that is the big backup as usual. But yeah, it's a shame that currently, well, we have got these locations like Seoul and New York who are going through some renovations, so they're taking a year off. I think New York have every intention to come back, as do Seoul, but it's just that they're having a year off at the moment. I mean, we didn't go to Spa for 1 year in 2005 or 2006 whilst they were doing the renovations to the bus stop chicane. So I mean, it's not the end of the world.
No, you are right. It's just interesting. I find it interesting that, you know, obviously there was I saw an article where it said no race for Formula E in America is like unacceptable. So it'd be interesting to see if they find a short-term replacement, even if it's Long Beach. Like, let's go back to Long Beach. Let's have some fun. But it's just interesting. I feel like the calendar's changing a lot, and there was an identity to Formula E sort of at the beginning, and I know times move on, but we're chucking in all these new races, exciting venues like Cape Town, right? Which has been confirmed, and obviously, you know, we should have been on the calendar last year, Ed, but it's on the calendar this year. But it's just interesting to see how it's changing. Like, we're adding more races, but there's some core races that you could say, or core locations, just starting to float away.
Yeah, and there's always a sense of the calendar is that there's going to be elements you can't control, right? There's always going to be logistical nightmares that pop up left, right, and center. And New York, I believe there's the ferry company that wants to build more stuff on the terminal, which is exactly in the same place as the circuit is during race weekends. So that, I think, is the problem there. Whether there can be a long-term solution, I don't know. But certainly in the short term, New York is out for the moment, in Brooklyn at least. Certainly great we have got Cape Town on the calendar, of course, because there are a lot of sort of hurdles in the country that had to sort of be overcome to actually host the race there in Cape Town. Great to have. We know, rather than having Marrakesh confirmed at the last minute, we know we got a race on the African continent going into the season, which is good because, I mean, it is supposed to be a world championship, so it's great we visit, you know, a few different parts of the world. And of course, Hyderabad representing Asia and India, of course, and Sao Paulo on for hopefully the first time, although it's been confirmed many times and then never actually happened. And then we've still got a couple of the mainstays like Berlin, of course, which has been on there every season. Monaco, which is now a more permanent fixture. and Jakarta, which was really popular last year. Rome is a bit later in the year as well. It's the sort of penultimate, the tri-ultimate and then the quad-ultimate round, sorry, to be precise, but it's the penultimate weekend, as it were. And then, of course, London as the finale, which I think will work great. And the thing that I'm happiest about is Mexico's the opener, because it means it's not in Saudi Arabia. But then, hey, that's just me. Other people may have to be waiting until January 27th. Eagerly
We've still got
anticipation.
2 races there, mate. I mean, you're still
I know, yeah,
miss
but
rounds
I
2
mean,
and 3.
but I haven't seen the season opener if pretty much the whole Gen 2 era. So, I mean, it's a breath of fresh air for me personally, but I know for other people, it's like, well, whatever. But I think the loss of New York, I can see from the team's point of view, because it's always the USA and China are the 2 big ones. China, logistically, pretty much impossible to get in at the moment because they've still got those very strict travel laws and stuff like that. And the USA, there are certainly other venues that could be used. Like you say, Jack, Long Beach comes to mind. Miami, we've seen hosting Formula One. It'd be nice to see it hosting something else at other parts of the year. Who knows? It would be a big upgrade from the previous Miami Formula E venue back from 2015, where they had to yellow flag the final sector and it was all put together very, very hurriedly on race day. I think James Roster used a quote. What was it? The most diverse calendar, and I think there's certainly something to that. But like you say, a couple of the mainstays like Paris and New York would be great to see them back. But like I said, there's things that are beyond people's control, and you sort of got to make the best of what's there. I think it's a decent calendar. I think there's some great circuits there. I'm looking forward to go racing.
I'm looking forward to go racing too. And it's interesting to see what these new locations like, because for me, I don't think Formula E will ever have this in terms of classic tracks. I think that's just an era that we've gone through from Formula One, and I can't see it. And I feel like because we've gotten so accustomed to like, oh, these tracks, these places are so iconic to go to. But I think in the way of the world is now, I don't think, and the way that Formula E is set up, I think that's kind of like my own kind of like pipe dream in a sense. Like I want there to be this same race, the same routine, you know, oh yeah, look at this amazing track that we go to, this amazing city that we go to every year. But because Formula E is so hard to put together, I think that's kind of like just these things have to change. But one thing that hasn't changed in the calendar, there's never been on the calendar, right? But there's always been talks about on the calendar, Pico, is Tokyo. And guess what? It's back again. We've been talking for years and years and years. Remember when I think it was Yamamoto took a Formula E car to I think it was Tokyo, if I remember correctly, and did like a little demonstration run and to try and get Formula E into Tokyo. And we're looking like now that they're trying again to get a race in season 10. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's long overdue. The fact that we've got Nissan as one of the teams. I mean, we had Team Aguri to start off with in Formula E, and we do we have any more Japanese teams? I'm trying to think, but I'm not 100% sure. But still, I think the fact that I think that Formula E is long overdue in Japan. I know that lots of drivers love Japan, like namely Andre Lotterer, because he raced in Super Formula quite a lot over there. But also like quite a lot of the guys who race in WEC, when they go over and do the 6 hours of Fuji, they love it over in Japan. And so I think it's fantastic that Formula E finally gets to go to the land of the rising sun. And I think Tokyo is fantastic for it. I mean, like Tokyo is massive. It's the size of basically, I mean, like if you put the center of Tokyo where the center of London is, the outskirts is Birmingham. That's how big Tokyo is. It's huge. So I think it's fantastic that we're going there for the Japanese fans. And I'm sure that they're going to put on a show there, and can't wait to see it.
See, that's more of the iconic places, right? That's more of the Formula E calendar that you expect, going to these capital cities, going to places that people instantly recognize. And I suppose, like, you know, I suppose if we went to maybe New Delhi in India, maybe more people would, you know, sort of have some of that sort of feeling. But I suppose, you know, India's or Mumbai, but you know, those places are tough to go to, I suppose, and obviously are very densely populated, which is probably another thing that you have to think about when you go to India. But like big names like Tokyo for me are things that you want on the Formula E calendar, Ed.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was just thinking about the rush hour traffic you get in a lot of those Indian cities like Mumbai, and it's just like completely insane. Like people like cutting off each other left and right. I don't know how we're going to run a race in that sort of situation. But yeah, Tokyo, certainly, you think Berlin, London, Tokyo, all three of those sort of really stand out. Whereas I think Hyderabad, back in the day, we had Punta del Este, which was not really a very well-known, Uruguay itself, not really a hugely profiled country, although I'm sure our Uruguayan listeners will disagree with me, but but I think that was a great race and a brilliant sort of destination, having it right by the beach. So I don't think necessarily having the best known city in the world is make or break, and I think even having the race can certainly raise the profile of the area. That it was the case with Jakarta, with the race there in Indonesia. I think that's really raised the profile of that region. But and certainly the fans enjoyed it too. So I think I think we'll have to see if the option happens, because remember McLaren signed an option for this season and it took a long time for them to confirm that. So I'm hoping Tokyo we get that option confirmed a bit sooner. But of course, different kettle of fish entirely with a track and a city compared to just a racing team.
Indeed. So I want to talk about final thoughts now. Our final thought to end this mammoth episode of the FEZ show. And it's kind of a big one, right? Because how big is this season for Formula E? Like, it's a new era. It's Gen 3. I feel like we got to get it right? We got to get it right. Pico, I'm interested to see what you want to say, because I'm looking at you right now and you're like laughing, smirking, which I know everyone can't see at this precise moment. So, but we'll have a discussion, right? Is it a big season for Formula E? Do you agree, yes or no?
It's bigger than that, Jack. It's large. It's sorry, I had to do that. It's huge season for Formula E. There's a whole new car, some new tracks, new places that we're going to. I think that more people are going to be watching it this year because it's going to be different. It's going to be quicker than it's ever been before. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a really exciting season. I think, like when we see in most motor racing, when there's reg changes, that you do see a bit more as teams dominate more, and then the rest of the seasons they catch up. So I do reckon that we're not in for like the season that we've had in the last couple of years, where it's been, you've got a fair few drivers fighting for the championship and something like 8 different winners or something. But I do think that we're still going to be in for a mega season, and I can't wait for it.
But there's already a big but coming over the series today as we're talking, because we were talking about it before when we were talking about, the format hasn't been sorted out yet. We're not 100% sure what's going on there and what people are doing. It turns out that we were expecting these fast charging pit stops. Maybe the race is going to an hour per se to accommodate for these fast charging pit stops. But these fast charging pit stops are now not going to happen because there are some reliability issues with the battery, which will then completely change the way we go racing. We could still be doing 45-minute plus one lap races, but at this precise moment, I'm not an expert with the battery and how it's developed. I don't know if that's too easy for the battery or not.
Yeah, we'll have to see, because the cars are supposedly a lot lighter, but I'm not sure if they've had to sacrifice the range of the batteries in order to do that. But yeah, we know there's a sort of RESS issue with the batteries that they have got a fix that they're working on, but because of the delays in sort of implementing the fix, we're not sure if they're going to be able to get that out in time for the first couple of races, or if one thing that has been talked about is sort of changing the regs mid-season, which we know the Porsche team are not happy about at all, but because they want consistent regs throughout the season, which makes sense, I guess. But certainly it was a big thing that Formula E were pushing. There was some video from some of the private testing. I forget which track it was at, but it was of the Jaguar, I think, coming into to be recharged, and people were kind of making fun of it because the mechanics were coming in quite leisurely just to put the little plug in the top of the car and to recharge it up. And they were saying, the charging pit stops is going to take ages. And it's like, well, the idea is that they take 30 seconds. So there's no reason to rush in testing, of course. So I think people were sort of taking one clip that a mechanic had taken or PR person had taken from testing and sort of blowing it up it was private testing as well. It's not really as big a deal. I think they were blowing it up into more of an issue than it actually is. But certainly we know there have been some crashes for the Gen 3 car. We know Sam Bird had one most recently, but also Oliver Rowland had one in his Mahindra earlier on this year. And we know that that's been part of the issue. And there are a lot of people that are questioning why some of these issues weren't picked up during the sort of manufacture test before they gave the cars out to the teams that Benoit Trellier and Teo Porcher were doing. So yeah, we'll have to see if we get a bit more news on that. But I think it's certainly an issue. It may have to be compromised without seeing any fast charging. I don't think it should spoil the racing too much, though. I think it just means there's a little bit less strategic options available to some of the teams going into the races.
But in terms of that, like, it's a huge blow. To me, that's a huge blow for Formula E. Like, the one thing that you really wanted, potentially not even featuring in next season because of these crashes and the unreliability of the battery. We're saying that it's a huge year, new regulations, but straight away, again, we're hit with this hammer blow.
I don't mind not having fast charging for the moment. I think it'll be interesting to see what it's like without it. I think they could do this season, then bring it in for season 10. Jesus Christ, we're with that. Been going a while now, hasn't it? But yeah, I think it'll be interesting because then that may create a new dynamic for season 10 as well. So if it's not right to do it now, then it's not right to do it now. I don't think the series will be affected that much, regardless. So they might have to do shorter races. They might have to change the format up a bit. But the thing is, like, because we got like a combination of something like 600 kilowatts of power in these cars. I'll be honest, like 250 could go for 45 minutes plus a lap, plus extra time with safety cars and virtual safety cars. I don't think we'll need fast charging immediately. I think either that or they're going to ramp up the kilowatt power by a lot, and then we'll see how that goes. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But I'm surprised that we didn't see it after when they announced the calendar, because they usually do it with the World Motorsport Council thing. But yeah, I'm sure we'll see it sooner than later.
I think probably this issue has kind of caused them to maybe delay what they had to do, maybe get more thinking time or what they're doing. It might be just be a normal announcement of, like a story, a news story or press release, which will come out to sort of explain what the format will be. I just think it's a little bit, it's like one of those things, we really wanted this and it's not, but hopefully you are right that the speed of the cars is the excitement next season, because these will be the fastest Formula E cars in the world, well, ever. And I think, Ed, to close us out, I think that's what we got to look forward to. Like, we got to hope that these cars do show off how fast electric cars can be.
And not only that, Jack, but they've got huge regenerative capabilities of getting that energy back into the battery, essentially, and reusing it from under braking. And we got the twin powertrain in the front and the back, and the no rear brakes, which is going to be very interesting to see how these cars handle under braking, certainly. And on top of, having McLaren, Maserati, back on the grid as well. I think there's a lot of new things that excite me. Like we just talked all about the new drivers as well. And I think going into the unknown in Mexico, I think it's going to be just really exciting to see who gets it right, who gets it wrong, and how it all develops over the course of the season.
Indeed, it says 40%. So 40% of the energy will be regenerated under braking. So 40% is a lot. So to me, that, I don't know for the racing format, but I suppose we don't have fast charging, but 40% even though they are racing at a higher speed, you know, is 45 minutes plus one not going to be too easy? That's the interesting thing to tell. We don't know yet. We don't know yet. I'm sure there are people that will know. The teams will probably know, but in terms of us knowing what the format will be, we don't know yet. But it's going to be an interesting season. I think definitely one which Formula E wants to get right on the marketing side massively. I think there are going to be a lot more eyes looking at this Gen 3 car, and I think we all three of us really want it to be a success, and I'm sure you guys listening to us want it to be a success as well. We don't want, you know, another setback and another reason for this series to maybe not get the light and the credit that it deserves. And you know, it's had a couple of knocks recently, and we definitely want it to start moving in the right direction. But boys, it's been an absolute mammoth episode. Thank you so much for your time. And yeah, well, I'm looking forward to doing a couple more of these as we get closer and closer to preseason testing.
We got there, fellas. Well done. Yeah, can't wait for Valencia. But I'm sure we'll do another one of these beforehand. Unless we don't. In that case, see you in February when we do the next version of the FEZ show.
No, we'll definitely be doing lots more.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. And again, yeah, thanks for sticking with us, guys, because you won't be able to tell this in post, but after it's all been through post. But yeah, this is a bit of a slog to get through points, but enjoyed it every moment of it, and can't wait till the next one.
My recording is on, to put it into perspective, how short this is compared to what it is. My recording is on 1 hour 35 at the moment.
Well, mine's on 1 hour 36, but you know, you gotta love a bit of technical difficulties on the first episode back, right? But you don't get to see that. But you know, we sat there, we've been patient, we're happy. Formula E is nearly back, and we are super looking forward to it. We will be back probably to wrap up some of the latest news and gossip, probably in a week's or two's time. And then as we get closer to testing, then we will get even more in depth with what is going on in the world of Formula E. Thank you so much for listening to the FEZ show. I've been Jack Giordmaina. Thank you so much. Goodbye.